As promised, the third and final part of the gun doubles offset week mini-series, just a couple of days late. This features the other great plays in this formation that aren't in the spread or pass balance playbook that we featured in the first two videos. So if you're making a custom playbook, or if you just want to use a different playbook from spread but you want to dig into this formation, these are some great plays to try out. The main focus here is the glance RPO, but we'll be going over 5 total plays in this video. The more I run this formation, the more I think that it really is the best formation in the game, with the best combination of runs, RPOs, quick passes, screens, deep shots. It has it all. Not only do you have great options against every possible defense that you'll see online, but you have multiple ways of attacking each one, so you'll never be predictable. It is a little, it has a little bit of a learning curve, as some of the plays are maybe a little unusual, but I think it's really fun and definitely worth the challenge. So we can, have some fun learning it now and come out strong with it at the beginning of Madden 21. So let's get started with RPO alert glance against 3-4 odd. So I think this year, when most people are running RPOs, it's really some form of running the bubble, essentially. You're either handing it off, you're throwing the bubble, because that probably is the safest and most consistent RPO to run. But if you dig into a few of these other ones, like I've showed you with the previous videos, some of the cool things you can do with RPO reads, or even some of the peak RPOs, there's some really interesting things that you can open up. And then things like this, where you have an actual route combination on one side, and then you have a glance on the other, to the right here to Michael Thomas, to kind of hit that third level, which is very rare and very unique in this game, but it can really open things up for you. And then the run off of that, just the way that the defense is programmed to defend RPOs, especially terrific run defense like 3-4 odd, cover 4, becomes really weak, because those run-fitting defenders, like the safeties and the linebackers, start to back up, and you can have a good option with the run as well. It kind of works as a draw. So this one's really interesting here. I'll post here on the screen which playbooks you can find this, but essentially you have 3 really good options. You have the slant to the left that you're going to set to the field, and then you have the glance, essentially like a 7-yard post route. And then, the handoff is kind of like your last resort. It's not as good as it can be, because it is a power, and powers are still a little bit weak. So it's not great, but it is a good, if things get muddied up in your pass read, it's always a good final option. So particularly against plays like cover 3 and cover 4, where the flat defender is coming from the slot, in this case, I really like this slant bubble option over here. Like I went over in the second video how good slant flat can be, like against these cover 3 and cover 4 looks, where the flat defender will take the bubble, and then you're just throwing that slant right in that window before the Mike linebacker can get into the mix there. And this just makes that much better, because the only one defender that can make a play on that, this guy, usually he's playing the run a little bit. So if it's a CPU, he's always kind of in his spot, in his lane, playing the run game. Even if it's a pass commit, he doesn't really get involved. And if it's a user, unless you're really, really predictable, they're never going to get out there. So in this case, I'll just show you. We just hit this window here, and usually I'll just possession catch that for easy 10 yards. Now, what's interesting about this RPO, and as we get into a bunch of the different variations, is that the handoff is long, which is not good for run reasons, but it does allow us a little bit more time to let the zones find their place, essentially let that window open, and we can throw that slant much later than we would be if this was, say, an outside zone handoff or an inside zone handoff. So the slow handoff actually works for us, and as you'll see later, it allows us to throw that glance route to the right. So now if they are doing other things like changing their flat assignment, pass committing, things like that, it really doesn't matter. All you're looking for is there a little window there? If there is, we're just going to go ahead and throw that, and then I just possession catch that because I don't want the enforcer to take my head off. And you can also throw this against press coverage. I'll show you here that we can throw it against press coverage. I probably wouldn't bother with it because, a lot of crazy things can happen against it, but you'll see you can still find that window there if you're confident in the coverage. But I'd probably advise against it in general. Now the glance over here is nice against these off zone coverages, even off man coverage. And what you'll see here is that obviously, you know, this guy is never going to be able to defend the post. The flat defender is playing the run, and the safety can sometimes get involved depending on the cover 4 you're coming up against. But in this case, there's just a nice big window here that you can just throw and get your 15 yards. Now, you do get that enforcer taking your head off, but if you're a little bit more diligent with your your possession catch, you can get that 15 yards. And now in this case, I showed you like with the slant bubble, you can still throw it against press coverage. Here, I really wouldn't, because the press delays the glance a little bit, and then the safety gets in a bit of a better position so that if you do try to throw it there, he can make a play on it. So yeah, really something just for these off zone coverages and off man coverages and things like that. It's also kind of cool because this, you know, cover 4 drop makes it really hard to throw the bubble RPO. And even if it didn't, sometimes what I face, you know, when I'm running a really heavy RPO offense, a lot of times some people will actually try to sneak in on this guy and try to cover the bubble themselves and try to pick that off. So sometimes you could do something kind of fun where, you know, you can play with that guy where he thinks he's taking the bubble, and then you can just throw the slant right over him. It's not super amazing and effective, but it's just something fun to play around with, have some fun at this late stage in Madden 21. Now the handoff here is not amazing, but it's not terrible either. Like I was saying, you know, those safeties aren't going to be as aggressive because just how they're programmed with the RPO. And then the handoff takes a while, but again, it's more of a last resort. If you want to make it a little bit better, you can motion the tight end over here, kind of create this H-back roll. I showed you in the first one, there's a few interesting things we can do with the read RPO with him there. Here, it just kind of creates a kind of a lead blocker and things really open up there. So that's something definitely that would make this much, much better. The only thing that kind of really changes is that you can't really throw this glance anymore because there's nobody to engage with that outside linebacker, that flat defender. And so he'll be able to sink underneath and cut off that glance route. But you're still going to have a good option over here with the slant bubble. And cover 3 is always almost exactly the same. It's going to be as cover 4 drop. In this case, it's just single high, but everything pretty much works the same here. You have the slant over here, but you have actually much more room. You could potentially rack catch that and get, you know, 15 to 20 yards. And likewise, you will also have the glance right here. Now, one thing I won't really do here is go over different fronts and different coverages, different alignments of cover 3. It's really worth getting some experience with these different fronts and different coverages because things do change. By and large, you know, things are going to be like the slant bubble is always going to be consistent. Sometimes this glance can get a little bit muggy, and sometimes the blocking can get a little bit muggy. But, you know, with practice, you start to kind of pick up on all these things and know when is the perfect time to run all these things. If it's something like a you know, a nickel front or something like that, where this guy isn't an outside linebacker and he might be over here, like a safety, then I'd probably shy away from throwing that glance. That's really something you want to look at if there is just a big window there that you see pre-snap, and then you would look at the glance. Otherwise, you're going to be doing your regular RPO with the slant and the handoff. The other thing is, in terms of blocking, a lot of the fronts that you come up against, say if it's odd front or an over front where you have somebody in the B gap, you do come across issues here because as you see here, the left guard is pulling. We're essentially reading the second level linebacker there, but the center has to go and block the nose tackle, which means you have a defensive end in the B gap and an outside linebacker that against your one left tackle there. So somebody is coming through unblocked. And see, as you'll see here, we need to get that slant off pretty quickly or else we're going to get sacked. And if we do end up handing the ball off here, we get hit in the backfield. So definitely something to consider there. You know, this is something you'll pull out if it's the right front for you. Now in this case, we throw that slant and that glance relatively early, so we don't really care. But if we do have the potential of handing it off, we probably don't want to run it under certain fronts. But if you are running it against an even front, like a over front, you can always just flip the play, and their defense essentially becomes an under front. Nobody's sitting in the B gap, and you'll have all day to throw that. So, you know, you kind of have positive and negative running it with the power. The power allows you to have that, like I was saying, that kind of extra time to throw the ball and allow those windows to develop. Don't worry about getting the illegal man downfield penalty. It really doesn't come up with this. But you do have that negative if it's not so great of a pass play. We can also, against this cover 3, we can also bring this H-back over here, and then you will have the numbers. You won't have somebody blowing you up, but then again, you lose that glance route. So you do have a lot of options here, and I think they're really, really good. Now, when you're running these heavy RPO offenses, a lot of times you'll see people stacking the box and pass committing, or stacking the box and just playing man-free over here. That's when you do want some other options than just running the bubble, because this allows things to open up. Now, if it's press man, I wouldn't go to this. Again, press really makes this all difficult. But if it's off man, it's going to be really good for you. So in this case, of course, you have the slant here. You do have to throw that relatively quickly so you don't have the blitz coming in, but it's there. And likewise, you do have the glance. So if your user defender is over here, you don't really want to play around with him, you can throw it to the right over here, and you do have the potential of taking that to the house. If you rack catch that and catch them off guard, you can take that upfield for a score. So in general, you're calling this play, I like to stick it in my audibles, you just always have it kind of an option for me, when you really know it's going to be there. So if you see that off cover 0, it's going to be a great option for you, or say cover 1, if you see cover 1, it's really good. And then if you see these cover 4s and cover 3, it's going to be really good. Now, if they do sneak in a cover 2 and you don't expect cover 2, that's when you see that the window is not going to be open there, and then you're just going to hand it off against, you know, a relatively poor run defense. But if you see cover 2, like if it's obviously cover 2, I wouldn't throw this, because the slant runs right into the vertical hook, and the glance gets muddied up by that hard pressing corner over there. So if you see here, I try to throw it there. You know, you can kind of throw that over a linebacker, but against a DB, it's not really going to work. But what's cool is if you are in the Panthers playbook, you have the alert glance, so everything's the exact same, but the number 1 on the strong side is blocking here, and the bubble works really, really well against cover 2. So if I go to cover 2 here, that hook defender doesn't get involved, and then the corner is going to get blocked, and so you should get you know, at least 10 to 15 yards off that. So that rounds out the glance 3rd level RPO game. Some other fun things. This is the last RPO we'll go over before we get into some of the play action passing concepts. You have this fun play, RPO orbit zone peak. So in the first video, we went over the outside zone peak and the power zone peak. So this is pretty much the same thing, except you have the orbit motion working behind that. So this is more of a fun play rather than amazing play, so just something to have a little bit of fun with, but it has its uses as well. All of the uses that we went over with this play before, plus a little bit of extra onto it. Where I like to run this is particularly against these guys that are, you know, stacking the box with a base line or a cover 0 and playing pass commit and or man coverage, man free coverage off of that. This allows me to have some options. So say if they're running cover 0 here, what's nice about this motion is that the man defender doesn't follow him. So then over here, although we don't have blockers to the left side, they are going to run off their routes, and we will have some options underneath. What I will do is smart out the dig over here, the little in route, just to move that guy further. He usually doesn't get the block on, but it just creates a little bit more separation. Now you could just go ahead and run the regular inside zone orbit bubble motion, but the problem is if your opponent runs with that, sometimes the inside zone isn't really great, or sorry, the outside zone isn't really great to run against the cover 0. So instead of a bubble handoff option, this is a bubble slant handoff. So you got a 3-way option right here. So I'll just show you right here. The man defender doesn't run with him. Now, Michael Thomas obviously isn't really the guy you want to be running this. And you see we don't get that block, but we do get a few yards that we can pick up. And if you have an over-aggressive user defender that, you know, motions himself and follows that orbit motion, so say then he gets out of the box and then you have a true 3-on-3 over there, he can make that easy tackle. But because you have this RPO tagged onto this with the slant in the middle here, you can just throw that easy slant because the safety that's covering him man-to-man is never going to win that, and the user is keying the bubble here. So you just got to be careful here because that edge defender is coming in hot, like nobody's blocking him, so you just got to watch him and essentially throw that slant right before he can get there. So in this case, the linebacker is out. He's never going to make a play on that. And then if you have a Tyreek Hill, you should be able to take that to the house. Now this is, again, you got to watch and make sure that that user is over aggressive. Otherwise, just hand that off. Against baseline, these RPO peaks are really, really good because there's nobody to obstruct that slant route. So he gets a free release off the line and it makes the read much, much easier. You're essentially reading that read defender right there. A lot of times that's a user linebacker. If they're aggressive downhill, you just go ahead and throw that slant. If they hesitate at all or if they back up, then you just hand that off. And this particular handoff, this particular run scheme is really, really good against this 3-4 odd because it just splits everything right open. You can usually get easy 5 to 10 yards off that. So what we'll do is we will option the running back. So then we will throw that slant. And the orbit motion just adds a little wrinkle to that just to muddy things up for the user. Now, of course, you always want to do the possession catch so you don't get your head off. And likewise, if they go ahead and you know, this is something that just happens at random. People aren't usually selecting this, but if I just go ahead and option the quarterback here, just to simulate that them backing up and playing the pass, you'll see that you have just a ton of room inside, assuming you don't get a crazy block shed against some of these ability players, but even then, you can kind of evade him and pick up your nice yards. And then you can do the same things that I've been saying with the other stuff. Like you can, if you have off zone coverage here, you can smart route that dig here, that little in route, and you can throw that and the corner doesn't really react properly. So you can just throw that right here and just catch that underneath him. That's really, really consistent and easy. Okay, so I think we've covered every possible RPO and every possible combination of all those RPOs in this formation. Took 3 videos to do it, but I think it's well worth it. So if you made it, you know, this far through that, congratulations. You've probably mastered all those by now and you should be having fun with those. Now, we're getting to a couple of the other play action plays in this formation here. So this one in particular is really, really awesome because you have, first of all, you have that outside release. I won't go over that again. You know, instant touchdown against press man, even some of the cover 3 and cover 4 and stuff like that. But the concept to the left is really where this shines. You guys know that those deep dig routes are really, really nice in this game. Here, you're actually just swapping it so that it's actually coming from the slot. And he gets this nice outside release that he can't get bumped, he can't get a zone chuck, and he can't get pressed by press man. So he's always free. And then that play action is surprisingly nice. You know, if you're running a lot of this RPO stuff, it does affect the user defender. He comes down a little bit, and the last thing he's expecting is a 15-yard dig above him. So it's actually surprisingly something that works out really, really well. And you also have this little 5-yard in that can be just a nice little hot read for you. So you can actually even convert him to a drag. Same thing, maybe a little bit smoother you can do. And then you would just look, if that drag's there, just go ahead and take it. But more likely than not, that dig is going to be nice and open. So here we're just a cover 4 match. Probably not the best thing to show this against because people don't really run this. But if you see here, you know, the underneath zones will come down on that, but this dig gets nice and open here. Now that's the one problem there, is that the play action blocking isn't amazing. So I was kind of forced to throw that a little bit earlier than I wanted to. But if, you know, the blocking does hold up, you can wait for him to clear a little bit. And then once things clear a little bit, you don't have to catch that in traffic. But where this really shines is, you know, spot drop stuff. So this is just cover 3 right here. You know, against cover 3, you can just, you know, easily throw this underneath here. You know, pick up your easy, you know, chunk yardage there. But more likely, you're really just going to be throwing that dig right here. So, you know, those hooks, those flats never really get deep enough to cover these digs. And assuming the user doesn't get all the way back there, that's going to be nice. And that'll work against any of your zone coverages. Now, man coverage, like I was saying, that outside release, and I think I was just baselining there accidentally. That outside release does a really good job of outside releasing and not getting pressed at the line of scrimmage. And so he just totally burns his man. Even if he has some of these nice coverage abilities, he's never going to get covered. So really, really good there. And then like I was saying, like if you're coming up against this cover zero stuff, which you do tend to see a lot, trying to cover these, trying to defend these RPOs. So if they're running press coverage here, maybe you want to cancel the play action here. And then you can have this outside release fade here for an instant touchdown to keep those guys off of you so you can run the RPOs that you want to run. And the last one is kind of unnecessary because it is kind of something you can just put together with hot routes. Like I made a video specifically on 4 verticals, and I think I even covered it in the last video. But if you want a nice quick snap option with the play action that can maybe bring in that user linebacker a little bit, this is really nice for you because everything's set up really well. If you remember this combination where you have a streak from the slot receiver and a comeback from the number 1 there, it's an instant cover 3 touchdown. So assuming you get an inside release, so if they're running curl flats, that guy engages with the slot wide receiver, a lot of these sets he will inside release, and then you can just throw that with an outside over the top pass lead and you can get your 1 play score. Or if you don't want to mess around with any of that, you can also outside release your slot guy by just putting on the hot route fade. And so what that'll do is he'll get an outside release, which you won't be able to get the shot, but you can get this really nice and consistent 30 yards down the seam. And that's it. Finally, we've finished up with this formation. I'm still running it a lot. I really, really like it. Just so many options. The unfortunate things is some of these really nice plays that I went over here isn't in the spread playbook that I use. But if you're doing your own customs, you can put together something really, really nice. Or if you're just hopping around, want to try some different things, you're going to have options, nice unique options in a variety of different books. Okay, so if you guys appreciated these 3 videos, definitely leave a like. If you haven't seen those, I would definitely go into those, especially part 1. It really puts everything together, makes it all understandable, and puts the whole scheme together in a nice cohesive package. Part 2, we went over the better passing plays that we can work off the RPOs. And this is just a fun video that we kind of went over the other plays in other books. Okay, we'll see you guys in the next one.